What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. It's time for our newest Skyrim Remastered build, and this is an old favorite that's been requested for a very long time. This is the Avenger. The Avenger grew up in a volatile political climate and had everything he held dear ripped away from him at a young age. Fortunately, he was taught to be lethal with a bow in his hands, and now that will come back to haunt everyone who wronged him. The Avenger never forgets a face, and once you've been marked for death, it's just a matter of time before you find a glass arrow lodged between your eyes. Nothing brings to the Avenger more pleasure than killing members of the Thalmor, and he will make sure that as long as he breathes, the Dominion will never rule over Tamriel. With the legendary bow Zephyr, and the mixture of training and a will to survive, the Avenger fires arrows faster than even the greatest warriors think is possible, and while he zips around the battlefield, the Avenger never misses his mark. I would also say that while this build doesn't have to be a werewolf, you should definitely consider it. We think it's a cool option, and we'll explain why in the factions section. Before we get into the build, don't forget that timestamps can be found in the description below for all of your video navigation needs, and we also have a brand new modded build coming pretty soon. But with that said, let's get this build started with the Avenger's race, standing stone, and stats. The Avenger is a wood elf, which means he has the innate ability to call on animals to serve him for 60 seconds once per day. He is also 50% resistant to poison and disease. As a Bosmer of Valemord, he will begin the game with +10 to archery and a +5 boost to light armor, both skills being mentioned because this build uses them. As for standing stones, use the Lover Stone early on to level all of your skills more evenly. When leveling is less of a concern, switch up to the Atronach Stone for superior anti-mage protection. It's classic FudgeMuppet advice, but it stands the test of time when it comes to non-modded builds. With this, you gain 50% spell absorption, which is super useful for anyone coming up against tough mages and dragons. We can dodge our way around melee attackers, but sometimes those pesky mages will just get you with their area damage. The -50% magicka regen won't affect us because we do not use magicka. The Avenger's stat spread will be 60% health to stay alive and 40% stamina for plenty of bow zooming and slowing time. The old Avenger build had 75% stamina, but after some heavy experimentation, we decided this was way too excessive. 40% is more than enough to effectively execute this playstyle. Enchanting will also give you a significant boost to stamina and stamina regen, but we'll get into that a little later on. Now for the backstory. The Avenger was born in Eldenroot in the heart of Valemwood. He was just as innocent as every other youth in the province, interested only in play and food, but due to his father's occupation, the Avenger was kept inside, studying far more than most young Bosmer. The Avenger's father was a noteworthy political figure in Eldenroot. He had always been a standout when compared to the other politicians who played it safe, and at the core he was very nationalistic. He was also a historian, and knowing the history of his people, he believed true Bosmer society should not be allied with the Thalmor. In politics, he always voiced any concerns he had with honesty, but recently, instead of taking the edge off, he had been leaving his words sharp, and holding less and less of his true feelings back. This was seeing him in frequent conflict with the current climate, especially in Eldenroot, the former capital of the First and Second Aldmeri Dominion in Valemwood. The Avenger's father didn't like the Outmalid government controlling the land of the Bosmer. Their rule was authoritarian, and he believes the High Elves would, in theory, burn Valemwood to the ground if it meant achieving domination over the whole of Tamriel. Now this would be quite the ideology to place on a youth, but the Avenger's father wanted his son to eventually fight for the same cause. His mother, on the other hand, was an individual who spent much more time outdoors. She was an accomplished hunter and taught the Avenger the art of the hunt and the precise skill of archery, while his father taught him the importance of being willing to bleed for one's homeland. In Eldenroot, living in the shadow of the enormous Grat Oak, parents were hesitant to let their children play with the Avenger. Similarly, the high concentration of Outmer in the city looked at him with disdain, associating the innocent youth with his father's views and values. When the Avenger was in his teens, his father took him and his mother with him on a journey to Falanesti. The once prospering walking citadel now took root in the south of the province, and the Avenger's father blamed the Dominion for this. He believed the Thalmor removed the stone which allowed the city to walk, and voicing that opinion had spurred much discourse in the province. Some called him a conspiracy theorist, others called him a treasonous traitor to the government of Valemwood, while a small few hidden in their homes in rural Valemwood, forced into silence, believed every word the Avenger's father said. They made it to Falanesti and made their way to the Great Hall, where his father was going to speak before Bosmer Bosma governors and some Thalmor officials. In the background, the Cameron throne sat unoccupied. Watching the conversation unfold was fascinating to the Avenger. He stood by silently, watching his father and his supporters exchange words with Dominion representatives. Unsurprisingly, the government did not appreciate his father's views. In fact, they explicitly warned him as he was dismissed. Keep his denouncements to himself or risk the charge of treason. He was on the edge of taking his views too far to them. Outside of Eldenroot, the Avenger was relieved to see far more Wood Elves than High Elves, and surprisingly, a large amount of Bosma exchanged supportive words with his father discreetly. The rebellion within Valenwood was hidden in plain sight, but it was reassuring to see that it still existed. On the long carriage ride home to Eldenroot, the Avenger and his family set up camp just before the sun fell behind the dense tree line. The Avenger ventured into the woods to collect firewood while his mother skinned their supper and his father buried his head in a book. An hour later, with a bundle of branches and twine under his arm, the Avenger retraced his tracks back to the camp. The first thing he saw was the smoke. How large had their campfire gotten? He could see the smoke from a few hundred steps away. He made his way to the last row of trees and the scene unfolded before him. The carriage was burning, his father lay in a pool of blood on the trail, and as he prepared to run at them, he saw the hooded man slit his mother's throat. The Avenger's heart writhed within his chest, and the nausea came on suddenly in response. "Find the boy," the hooded figure ordered to his companions. The Avenger watched from behind a tree, peering out just enough to watch the scene. The elves were all garbed in Thalmor robes, charcoal trimmed with yellow. The man with the dagger, who lurched over the corpse of his parents, scanned the area, peering almost directly at the Avenger for a brief moment. The Avenger would never forget that face, not for the rest of his life. He would see that pale face with ghostly white hair and a scar across the ridge of his brow every night in his dreams. If he didn't move now, he would surely be caught. The Avenger retreated back into the forest, setting his sights vaguely north in hopes of finding his way back to Eldenroot. The Thalmor would know exactly where he was going, so he had to be stealthy. He eventually tracked his way home, creeping to his house with a sack hood covering his face. He had stolen the hood from a passing trader on the fringe of Eldenroot, and after getting inside his house through the back window, he collected a change of clothes, some rations, and most importantly, his bow and arrows. For the following years, the Avenger lived as a nomad, drifting between various inns, campsites, and rural communities. He was a vigilante, never stopping in one place for longer than a day or two, and when he did stop, he used the time to rest and to read texts, expanding his mindset. Fortunately, age and the absence of a blade to shave his face made him hard to recognize by anyone who happened to know him in the past, and when he stumbled upon Thalmor patrols on the wooded trails, he killed mercilessly, acquiring quite the reputation for the bearded Bosma. One day, around 10 years after the death of his parents, the Avenger stopped at a quaint little inn on the outskirts of Arenthia. He had enough coin to buy a room and a warm meal, and in the room he had the luxury of a looking glass and a shaving blade. He used both. When he returned to the main room, he sat in the corner booth to nurse a cup of imported Cyrodiilic brandy. Over the years, the population of Thalmor officials had only grown more prevalent, and even in this small tavern, he couldn't avoid them completely. 3 Aldmer and Thalmor robes entered the tavern, and the Avenger nearly spat up a mouthful of brandy when he saw the one leading them. Pale-faced, ghostly white hair, and a scar tracing the ridge of his brow. The Avenger lowered his head and waited patiently, forcing down the emotions thrashing inside of him. Just before midnight, the tipsy Thalmor agents left the inn, and so too did the Avenger. He followed them out into the night, and when no bystanders were within sight or earshot, he drew his bow. In the blink of an eye, he dispatched 2 arrows through the hearts of the 2 associates. In the darkness, the scarred agent panicked, scanning the surroundings for the killer. A moment later, an arrow pierced his left calf. The scarred Thalmor agent tried to run, hobbling and crying in pain. Then the Avenger loosed again, impaling the right thigh. When the agent fell to the floor, the Avenger stooped over him. He relished in the moment, feeling an indescribable satisfaction when he saw the scarred elf recognize his shaven face. He attempted to plead for his life, but the Avenger wasn't interested. He pulled another arrow from his quiver and rammed it into the Thalmor agent's throat. It just so happens that the agent he killed was quite a notable officer, and the price on the Avenger's head was hefty enough as it was. He needed to get out of Valenwood. He needed to spend some time away from the influence of the Thalmor, and what better place to go than Skyrim, where the province was in rebellion. He knew little of the Stormcloaks, but he could feel his father's approval, so he made his way north before being captured on the border and taken to Helgen. After escaping the block, the Avenger will work on getting himself equipped first and foremost. He knows how to survive in the wilderness, so acquiring a bow and some protection is of paramount importance. While the main factor leading him to Skyrim was an escape from the Thalmor influence, opponents, the Avenger's thirst for their blood soon takes its hold once again, so he will work towards aligning himself with Ulfric and the Stormcloaks. Anything that will let him get within an arrow's range of a Thalmor agent appeals to the Avenger, and the prospect of foiling their grand plan by aligning with the Nords is too sweet to pass up. If that means defeating the Empire, so be it. The main thing about role-playing this character is to take as many Thalmor heads as possible. As for factions, he will of course do the Civil War siding with the Stormcloaks. Other than this, the main story and the Dragonborn DLC are definitely on the table, for becoming the Dragonborn will undoubtedly give him huge amounts of power and influence in Skyrim. It also involves ruining Thalmor plans with the help of Delphine. The Nords revere the prophetic Dragonborn, and with the Thumb at his disposal, he can achieve so much more than he could with just his bow. The Dawnguard DLC works well for the Avenger, siding with the Dawnguard of course, and finally the companions are also an option. It's ultimately up to you whether you cure or keep the werewolf form. It isn't necessary to the build at all, but as a Bosma and a skilled hunter, the form could fit him well. It would also play into his bloodlust of seeking revenge. What better way to avenge your family and feel good about it than turning into a massive wolf monster and literally crushing a Thalmor head between your paws? If you do this, you'll want to do Hircine's quest to get Hircine's ring, which you can then keep in your inventory and equip at will, allowing you to control your power instead of it controlling you. After all, you're aiming to kill who you perceive as monsters, and you should be careful not to play with fire too greatly and become a mindless savage yourself in the process. Now that we have the Avenger's backstory, role-playing, and factions sorted, let's take a look at how that will all come together with his skills, shouts, perks, and his playstyle. The main skills for this build will be archery, light armor, smithing, and enchanting. You'll notice there's no sneak here, as this guy is not a stealth archer, but rather a combat archer. The Avenger doesn't use conventional magic, so don't worry about spells. However, you can definitely utilize dragon shouts. One that could be worth using is Whirlwind Sprint, as the Avenger is an agile archer, maneuvering the battlefield rather than exclusively sniping from a distance, so being able to zip across the battle, whether offensively or defensively, could be very useful. In terms of powers, you can use your command animal power when needed, and also your werewolf form, if that's a path you choose to pursue. In this case, get the werewolf perks too. With that said, these are the Avenger's essential perks to take from each skill. Born a Bosma, trained by his hunter mother, and motivated by a passion to rid the world of the conniving Thalmor, the Avenger has all the ingredients to be the deadliest marksman in Tamriel. No one can make an arrow strike true between the eyes of a high elf like the Avenger. From the archery skill tree, take everything, except for the second and third rank of critical shot. The two most important perks here for the Avenger's playstyle are quick shot and ranger. The Avenger is all about speed, and with the former, he'll be able to draw his bow 30% faster. Combine this with the additional 30% boost granted by his unique bow, and he will be firing a constant stream of arrows at his foes. With the ranger perk, he can still move fast with the bow drawn. Next up, we have light armor, and this is a given for a wood elf. Foreign soldiers who find their way to Valenwood covered in heavy steel plate will soon see the folly in their ways, standing out like a sore thumb and falling down in a heap of flesh and metal after tripping on an exposed tree root. The Bosma prefer to dress lightly, getting as much protection as possible while preserving their ability to skip about, dodging creatures, spells, arrows, and sword swings. From the light armor skill tree, go for everything except for matching set. With unhindered, the Avenger's light armor will weigh nothing and won't slow him down when worn. This helps us stay fast, and it's one reason why we don't bother with things like the Steed Stone. While light armor is the Avenger's preference, he doesn't choose simple leathers. The Avenger's glass armor is a testament to the art of smithing, and if any soul is lucky enough to escape him without an arrow in the back, they won't soon forget the brilliant sight of the Bosma in shining glass. From the smithing skill tree, follow the left branch around to glass smithing, then grab dwarven smithing and arcane blacksmith. Finally, we have enchanting, and this skill is the difference between a well-maintained set of armor and a set that grants the wearer unnatural boosts to stamina, archery, and smithing. From the enchanting skill tree, take the middle branch up to and including extra effect. With all of the Avenger's skills, shouts, and perks gone through, we can now apply them to his in-game playstyle. The Avenger is pretty simple, yet really fun and challenging. Unlike a lot of archers, he will not hold back and attack from safety. Instead, the Avenger will be in the thick of action as a combat archer, constantly moving and ceaselessly firing arrows. Once you nail the process of firing arrows while moving, hitting both static and moving targets, you'll be unstoppable and the enemies will drop like flies. The idea is to be too elusive for ranged opponents and too quick and accurate for the melee opponents who will be shot down before they can even draw their swords. This is a ranged build who really gets in the face of his foes, firing arrows from his bow like rounds from a machine gun. As for the gear, the Avenger will wear a full set of glass armor, smith to its max potential, enchant the armor and boots with fortify stamina and fortify stamina regen, and then the gauntlets with fortify archery and fortify smithing. Instead of the helmet, we'll be using the Croesus Dragon Priest mask. Not only does this look fantastic, but it also improves lockpicking, alchemy, and archery by 20%. Then get a ring and necklace of your choice, both enchanted with fortify archery and stamina regeneration. Remember, if you're a werewolf, you'll also have Hircine's ring, which you can equip as you see fit. The weapon of choice will be the unique bow called Zephyr. As I mentioned before, this bow can be drawn extremely fast, and combined with the quick shot perk, you'll be able to draw arrows much faster than normal. The Avenger will use glass arrows in conjunction with Zephyr. And there you have it, guys, our latest FudgeMuppet Remastered Skyrim build. Subscribe to the channel for more builds and other top-notch content, and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. As always, timestamps can be found in the description below for your video navigation needs. Thank you so much for watching, guys. My name is Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.